All right, so LANs and WANs, they're closely related. LANs is LAN stands for local area network. Typically, you're going to be looking at a group of computers, printers, other resources that are networked together for a relatively small group of a wider organization. So generally, it's geographically bound by a small area. For example, the School of Accountancy has its own local area network that covers, Connor Hall. School of Business has their local area network that covers Holman and maybe a couple classrooms down in the basement of Connor, and so on down the line. So we've got all kinds of hardware, including hubs and switches that connect all of these computers and other devices together in the LAN. Most of you probably have a hub or a switch in your house, even though you may not even know it. All right? So LANs communicate through what are called data packets. So these packets have to start on your device, your phone, your computer, your printer can actually communicate back and forth. So the packet has to get sent to a destination. And so the packet gets additional layers of addresses added to it at various points along the way so that it knows where to go. And we use what's called a MAC address, media access control address, to identify the specific components that the packet is going to work with. So, for example, your computer has a MAC address for the actual computer itself, but you also have additional MAC addresses beyond that because your computer can communicate lots of different ways. It can communicate with the network via your Wi-Fi radio. It can communicate via your Bluetooth radio. You can connect to the internet through Bluetooth. It can connect, some computers still have an infrared receptor that it can communicate with. Some computers may still have an old network adapter, an Ethernet port that they can connect. Of course, you have USB, so you can connect via USB to a network. You can connect via FireWire or HDMI to your network. So that's 7 right there, and other connection protocols allow you to connect different ways. So each of those has to have a unique hardware identifier so you know which USB port to go to, so you know what your Wi-Fi radio is called. So that's basically that MAC address. Some of you may have had to type in a MAC address for your phone or for your laptop, for example, to connect to your home Wi-Fi router. Okay, so the WAN basically is the wider area network that links together lots of different LANs within an organization. So if you think about, we talked about School of Accountancy, School of Business. So if we think about overall Ole Miss, the WAN would be all the networks that are internal to Ole Miss as a whole. So all of these networks are connected together and can talk to each other. And also we have the wider, just general Ole Miss resources like Blackboard and My Ole Miss and so forth. So that is the WAN, and that includes not just the Oxford campus, but also the medical center and all of our regional campuses throughout the state would be considered part of that larger WAN. So you can think of large companies like IBM that has locations all over the world. Basically, their WAN is global in scope. So that's how companies allow employees or students, in your case for Ole Miss, to connect to the resources when they're in the various locations. And then we also have remote access that allows them to connect externally if they're external to the physical resources in the WAN. So here we add the routers as well as firewalls to provide protection. And of course, firewalls and routers can also be used in the local area network. Now, most of you have all of these in your home already. If you have a cable box or a DSL box, or if you have your own Wi-Fi router, that single box performs all of these functions. It can be a router, it can be a switch, it can be a hub, and it includes firewall capabilities as well. The only difference between a switch and a hub is a hub broadcasts messages out through all the ports, and just once it gets the right one, it continues. The switch has a little bit more intelligence built into it, and it will send out to the device, the designated device. So switches are a little bit smarter, and you can set your router up to be a switch, a hub. You can set the firewall settings, and of course, as a router, it can communicate with other networks as well. So here we have a little bit more detail there. The router allows different networks to communicate with each other. So networks didn't always used to be use IP, Internet Protocol. As a matter of fact, there are lots of different network protocols. You can use Ethernet, Token Ring, and that have been around for a long time. Even across the Internet, there are different protocols that can be used. TCP, Transfer Control Protocol. You can use FTP, File Transfer Protocol. There are older ones, Gopher and Archie. Gopher, as you might imagine, was invented at University of Minnesota. So lots of different protocols, and routers allow the conversion between all those protocols, so different networks with different protocols can talk to each other. Firewalls, and your laptop and desktop typically have firewalls now too. Don't know about phones. I guess phones probably do as well. So the firewall basically is a filter for data packets coming in and going out. So you can set up rules to allow different types of packet requests on your network, or going into and coming into and going out of your network, or your individual laptop. And so the firewall is an additional level of protection. So a VPN is basically a way that allows us to communicate as if we are on a private network, or as if we are on a dedicated connection line, even though we aren't. A lot of companies used to have to pay a lot of money to install T1 lines or T3 lines or fractional lines right into their corporate offices, and connect their various offices together so that they would have a secure link. So VPN allows us to use the public internet and use encryption to communicate as if we were on our own private set of hardware tools and networking tools. So it's a lot cheaper than having your own dedicated lines that the internet service providers give you. By the way, that was one of the ways that WorldCom used to make most of its money, by setting businesses up with their own dedicated internet bandwidth. So WorldCom, which was headquartered here in Mississippi for a good long while, essentially was the backbone of the entire internet until they ended up going under.